Tonight we'll drift into the flickering shadows of medieval bedrooms, into the wooden halls of creaking castles and the straw-stuffed mattresses of candlelit cottages, and uncover the strange, sometimes charming, sometimes downright bizarre sleep habits of people who lived hundreds of years ago. Dim your lights, settle under your blanket, let the weight of the day slowly melt into stillness. The only thing you need to do is listen and breathe. And if this calm journey helps you unwind, feel free to tap like and subscribe, but only if it feels right. Before we begin, take a quiet moment to notice where you are. Which part of the world are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? Whether it's early morning or the middle of the night, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Now, let your eyes grow heavy, and let's begin. Let me tell you about something so delightfully odd. I almost didn't believe it myself the first time I read it. Imagine it's the year 1382. You're in a small stone house, not too far from the edge of a misty English village. The hearth is still warm from the fire that cooked your supper, a modest bowl of thick barley stew, perhaps, and a heel of sour bread. Outside, the night is ink black. No street lamps, no light pollution, just the slow hum of crickets, the occasional clop of hooves from a late traveller, and the faint howl of wind threading its way through thatched roofs. Now, most people today think of sleep as one solid chunk. You get in bed, you sleep, you wake up. But in medieval times, it was rarely like that. People slept in two phases, first sleep and second sleep. Somewhere in the middle, around midnight, they would wake up. Not for long, maybe an hour or two, just enough time to talk with their family, pray. Or if you were particularly lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you see it, you might snack. And what did they snack on? Cheese. Yes. Medieval midnight cheese was a thing. There are accounts from across Europe that describe people waking gently from their first sleep, lighting a little beeswax candle, and nibbling a slice of soft cheese, often paired with some spiced ale or a crumbly bit of dried fruit. Picture it now, the wax dripping slowly, the room quiet but for the rhythmic breathing of your siblings asleep in a pile of blankets beside you. You reach under a linen cloth and uncover the wedge of cow's milk cheese you saved from supper. Maybe it's got a slight tang to it, more earthy than what we're used to. Maybe the edges are tough from sitting out on the wooden shelf all day. But in that moment, it tastes perfect. The only sound is the faint crunch of your teeth and the soft rustle of straw as you shift back into your makeshift bedding. Why cheese, you ask? It was one of the few preserved foods that didn't spoil easily. Rich in fat and protein, it made for a sleepy, satisfying snack that helped usher in second sleep, like a medieval sleep aid. The closest thing they had to a warm mug of cocoa, or perhaps a 14th century hot pocket. There's something tender about that scene, isn't there? The candlelight flickering against the rough stone walls, the faint smoky scent of firewood clinging to your tunic, your hands still slightly chilled from the evening's chores. And there you are, mid-dream, reaching for comfort in the form of fermented milk. One old French diary from 1419 even mentions a family ritual of whispering stories during this midnight snack. Just quiet voices in the dark, heads pressed together beneath wool blankets, trading tales while the cheese was passed around. And isn't that something? We think of the past as distant and rigid. But here are parents murmuring bedtime stories to their sleepy-eyed children, much like we do now. Only instead of glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to their ceiling, they had the constellations themselves, visible through the wooden slats in their roof. You might wonder, did this happen every night? Well, not always. But it was common enough that medical texts and moral guides from the era warned people not to indulge in excess cheese between sleeps, lest they invite indigestion or languid spirits. Of course, it's always the good snacks they try to take away. Now, as your mind softens into that cozy state between thought and dream, imagine yourself curled up on scratchy wool, stomach warm with milk and curds, heart heavy with sleep's second invitation. And as the wind presses gently against the outside wall, the candle's flame wavers and dies. You sigh and sink into second sleep. Now, let your mind wander too. Let me take you now into another sleepy corner of the medieval world. The fire is down to a faint red glow, barely alive. Outside, the night is quiet. The kind of deep rural silence that only comes when the clouds are thick, and even the moon chooses to sleep behind them. The air smells of peat smoke and wet soil. Inside your cottage, the walls are close and the ceiling low. There's a gentle draught slipping under the door, but you've wrapped your feet in wool and you're lying in what can only generously be called a bed. You've eaten a thick chunk of bread torn straight from the loaf. The crust is hard, so hard it left a scrape on the roof of your mouth. You chewed slowly, eyes already half closed, your fingers still dusty with flour. No butter, no jam, just bread. Dry, cracked, and warm from sitting beside the fire. You swallowed. You wiped your hand on the wool blanket, and then you sank back into the straw, pulled the coarse linen over your shoulder, and felt it. A crumb, just beneath your ribs. Hard, sharp. Not big, not even visible in this flickering light, but enough to make your shoulder twitch and your brow furrow. You shift slightly. The straw rustles. A chicken outside clucks once and then silence again. You reach down, brush the spot, but the crumb's already gone, vanished or pushed deeper into the bedding. And that, right there, is the magic and the misery of medieval sleeping. You weren't just sharing your bed with family. You were sharing it with crumbs. Let's talk about the bed for a moment. Most people didn't have a frame. If you were lucky, there might be a wooden plank to raise you off the cold dirt floor, but more often it was just a sack, usually linen, sometimes wool, filled with straw, reeds, or in rare cases, feathers. You'd fluff it in the evening, slap it into shape, lay down a sheepskin or perhaps an old cloak for comfort, and there it was, your bed. Now imagine that same sack, every night catching crumbs, bits of bread, maybe some dried peas that rolled out of a bowl, even flakes of dried herbs or spilled salt. And because the bed was also the bench, the seat, and sometimes the dining spot, food and rest existed in the same small, lumpy space. In winter, the entire family might sleep in a huddle. Parents, children, infants, the family dog. Grandparents too, depending on space. There were no bedrooms, no walls to separate quiet from chaos. Everyone breathed the same air. Everyone shared the same warmth. And yes, everyone shared the crumbs. There's a record from 1356, written by a Yorkshire farm wife describing her evening routine. She mentions brushing out the bedding each morning, gathering crumbs for the chickens, and then, quite matter-of-factly, describes her husband's habit of eating in bed, even after she'd swept. She calls it his crumb sin, but she doesn't seem angry, just tired of sleeping on seeds and crusts. And isn't that strangely comforting? The idea that even 700 years ago people argued over crumbs in the bed. Not much has changed, has it? Now imagine this. It's late autumn. The rain has been falling all day, soaking the thatch of the roof, turning the path outside to mud. Your hands are raw from shelling beans. Your back aches from carrying water. You sit near the fire, eat your stew, lentils and onions with a bit of bacon fat for luck. And then, with your belly full, you lean back into the warmth of the bed. Your child curls against your chest. The dog circles twice at your feet, then settles in with a huff. You close your eyes and then crunch. That tiny, treacherous flake of crust under your shoulder blade. But you don't get angry, you just adjust. You've learned to live with these things. The crackle of straw, the scratch of wool, the cold air on your neck, the crumbs beneath your ribs. It's all part of life, part of sleep. Bread in the Middle Ages was everything. It was breakfast, dinner, sometimes dessert. The quality of your bread said everything about who you were. The poor ate rye or barley, coarse, dense loaves heavy with husks and bits of grit from the grinding stones. The rich ate fine white wheat, sifted and soft, known as manchet. But no matter your status, bread came to bed with you. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. There's a charming record from a 14th century Parisian apothecary who writes that he advised a noblewoman to sleep with a piece of bread under her pillow to ward off bad dreams. Not because of magic, he says, but because the scent was calming. The yeast, the wheat. It reminded her of her childhood, her nursemaid's hands, bread as lullaby. And bread in the bed wasn't always passive. In cold regions, people would sometimes hold a warm loaf against their belly, wrapped in cloth, like a heating pad. In monasteries, bread was hidden under robes to soften before eating. In peasant homes, toddlers were given crusts to chew on as pacifiers, one in each tiny hand rocking gently to sleep beside their parents. Now, back in your cottage, the fire has nearly gone out. A few coals glow faintly in the ashes. The dog is twitching in its sleep. Outside, the wind picks up, whistling gently through the shutters. You feel another crumb near your hip. You flick it away, but it sticks to your finger. You wipe it on the blanket. You sigh, but there's no frustration. Just the quiet knowledge that this is how things are. You pull the wool closer to your chin. You listen to the breathing of your family, the slow inhale, the pause, the exhale, and you let go. Even in noble homes, where bedding was finer and food more refined, crumbs found their way into sleep. One 15th century Italian countess reportedly refused to allow her husband into their bedchamber if he'd eaten without washing. "Crumbs are the devil's toothpicks," she once wrote. But her journals reveal the truth. She herself kept a sweet biscuit beneath her pillow, scented with orange peel and cloves, for comfort, for dreams. We like to imagine the past as separate, far away, unfamiliar, but sometimes it feels so close. A crumb in the bed, a snack before sleep, a grumble from your stomach in the dark. These are things we still know, maybe always will. And as your mind softens now, as your limbs grow heavy, as your body sinks into the old rhythms of night, you can feel it too. The warmth, the nearness, the simplicity, the soft breath of sleep rising in your chest. You turn once more, you settle, you press your hand into the straw. There are crumbs there, but they don't matter. Not tonight. Tonight the crumbs are part of the dream. Let me take you now into a room made of wood and silence. The door creaks as it closes, and a faint draught curls in under the frame. The air is cool but dry, touched with the dusty scent of old wool and melted wax. It's midnight, or near enough, and a single candle burns on the ledge near your bed. The flame is steady for now, but it dances just slightly as the wind passes by the shuttered window, whispering in from the village lane outside. This is not a modern bedroom. There's no switch to flick, no bulb to hum to life. There's just this flicker, this flame, this one small beacon of warmth against the velvet black night. You're lying on your side, a wool blanket pulled high over your chest. Your fingers rest just inches from the wooden edge of the sleeping bench, a low, carved frame made smooth from years of touch. The candle is close enough that its light brushes against your face, painting soft gold over your cheekbone, your closed eyelids. It's not bright, nothing in this world is, but it is enough to see by, enough to remind you that you are not alone in the dark. In the medieval world, the candle at midnight was more than just a light. It was a companion, a protector, a marker of time in a world without clocks. And for many, it was a ritual, something lit during that in-between space, between first sleep and second. Let me explain. We've already visited the idea of segmented sleep, how people would drift off soon after sunset, wake again around midnight, and spend an hour or two quietly awake before sinking into a second rest. In this space, neither day nor deep night, a candle was often lit. Not a large one, not an extravagance. Just a small stub of tallow or beeswax set into a metal holder, or even stuck directly into the neck of a broken jug. It gave off a warm, slightly sweet smell, sometimes mixed with the earthy scent of animal fat if it was tallow. This candle was precious. Wax was expensive. Even tallow required effort, rendered from animal fat and moulded by hand. For most families, candles weren't burned constantly. They were rationed, saved for moments that mattered. But this moment, this small slice of wakeful midnight, it mattered. Imagine it. You wake slowly, naturally, not from a jolt or a sound, but because your body simply says, it's time. The fire has gone out, but the room still holds its warmth. You reach over, strike flint against steel. There's a spark. A few moments of fumbling. Then, at last, the candle catches, and a tiny flame blossoms into being. The room is revealed in slow shapes. The worn chest at the foot of your bed, the wooden cup half full of yesterday's cider, the folded linen stacked in the corner. Shadows move gently on the walls, like soft echoes. You sit up, stretch, and feel the stiffness in your shoulders. Some nights you'd pray, quietly, lips barely moving, a pater noster maybe, or a whispered plea to St. Agnes for peaceful dreams. Other nights you might write. If you were literate, and few were, you might keep a small book of reflections, copying thoughts in careful script by candlelight, and some nights you'd just sit. Watch the flame, let it warm the tips of your fingers, let your thoughts drift. There's something hypnotic about candlelight. Even now, in our world of LEDs and backlit screens, we feel its pull. But in the medieval world, it was more than mood, it was meaning. One old English housebook dated around 1450 gives this instruction. Upon waking in the night, light thy taper for comfort, and sit thee by it till thine heart be still. In other words, use the candle to soothe your soul. There's something beautiful in that. Some families had candle traditions. In one Flemish home, the eldest daughter was tasked with lighting the candle and reciting a small poem to protect the house from evil spirits. In another account from Prague, a widow lit a candle each night at midnight in memory of her late husband, placing it near the hearth so that no shadow should cross the place where he once sat. And not all candles were the same. The wealthy used beeswax, sweet-smelling, cleaner-burning, longer-lasting. The poor used tallow, cheaper, smokier, prone to sputtering. But either way, the light it gave off was soft, golden, never overpowering. It lit only what it needed to, nothing more. Let's return to the room. The candle is half burned now. The wax has dripped down the sides, pooling at the base. You watch it slide in slow rivulets, cooling as it hardens. There's a tiny crackle as the wick flickers, just once and steadies. The flame casts long shadows across the beams of the ceiling, revealing cobwebs in the corners and the soft curve of a wooden spoon left hanging on the wall. You hear the breath of someone sleeping nearby. Your brother, maybe, or your wife. Slow, even breathing. A rhythm older than memory. The room is warm with shared air and shared dreams. You close your eyes again, but keep the candle burning, just for now. There's a comfort in knowing it's there. A century in wax and fire. Let me tell you something odd. In parts of northern Germany, it was believed that if you stared into a candle at midnight without blinking, you could see your future in the flame. Some claimed to see ships, or weddings, or coffins. Others saw nothing but the flicker of time itself. There were rules, of course. The candle had to be lit with your own hands. It had to be made in silence, and no one else could be watching. Of course, most people didn't try. They just enjoyed the light, the warmth, the stillness. And then, when the time was right, they blew it out. One slow breath, a faint hiss. Darkness again. It's your turn now. The candle beside you has burned low, the wax has stopped dripping. The flame is still, small, waiting. You lean toward it, breathe in gently, and exhale. The room is silent once more. No flame, no light. Only the afterimage burned briefly into your vision. Only the memory of warmth on your face. You roll onto your side. The blanket shifts softly. The wooden boards creak beneath your weight. Sleep comes again. Not fast, not forced, but gently. Like the taper of a candle. Slowly dimming until all is still, all is quiet, and the night holds you. Let's settle in now. The candle is low, the fire has faded to a dull orange pulse in the hearth, and the chill of the stone walls is pressing ever so softly through the edges of the room. You've tucked yourself in, haven't you? Under the covers, under the weight of that one thick wool blanket. Scratchy, heavy, somehow always either too hot or too cold, but still, it's yours. And tonight, we're going to talk about that very blanket, the same kind that has kept people warm and a little itchy for nearly 1,000 years. Close your eyes if they aren't already. Let the idea settle in. A medieval blanket. Not from a castle. Not from a noble's bed covered in imported silks and downy pillows. No, no. We're talking about the blanket in a peasant's home. Thick, brown, woven by hand, maybe by your grandmother, maybe bartered from the weaver in the next village over. It smells a little of lanolin, of smoke, of old straw mattresses and yesterday's stew. Wool was the fabric of survival in the Middle Ages, It wasn't just clothing, it was walls, it was insulation, it was comfort, and sometimes it was currency. England's economy practically ran on sheep. There were towns whose entire identities were built around carding, spinning, dyeing and weaving wool. And for the common folk, the end result was often this: one large, itchy, durable blanket that served you year-round, no matter what the season brought. I remember reading one small passage from a man named Bertolf, who wrote in the 1100s about sleeping near a window during winter. He said, "The wind bites, but the blanket itches worse." And yet, he kept it. Everyone did, because to not have a blanket, that was unthinkable. They were made rough, these blankets. Sheep's wool wasn't always refined or combed perfectly. It retained little pieces of straw, sometimes the scent of the animal, and certainly its protective oils. You could try washing it, but there was always the risk it would shrink, sometimes comically, hilariously so. Picture a family of 6 trying to stretch a blanket that had curled itself up like a roasted beetle. It happened. But even with all that, these blankets were beloved. They were family heirlooms. Sometimes they were your dowry. A girl might arrive at her husband's home with nothing more than 2 dresses, a pot, and her mother's wool blanket. A child might be swaddled in the same cloth his grandfather once used on cold winter nights. A single piece of fabric could survive generations, patched, mended, and still whole. And they were versatile. Oh, they weren't just for sleeping. You might carry it to the fields if frost threatened in the early dawn. You might wear it as a cloak when you went to fetch water from the well, draped over your shoulders like a monk's habit. If a neighbour fell ill, you might lend it to them and hope it came back without fleas. Let's talk about those. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, realities of medieval life, and those thick wool blankets? Oh, they were 5-star hotels for the itchy and uninvited. That's why many people would shake their blankets vigorously each morning, sometimes even hanging them in the smoke of the hearth to kill anything crawling. The smoke helped a little. Not enough, but a little. And yet, sleep still came. Imagine now you're lying under one of these blankets. It's been a long day. You've worked, walked, maybe prayed. Your knees ache from kneeling. Your hands are red and raw from handling cold water. The blanket is scratchy, yes, but it's also warm. You pull it up, tuck it beneath your chin. Maybe your toes peek out at the edge. Maybe they don't. You close your eyes. You hear the sound of the fire settling, the small wooden creaks of the rafters above, and you're grateful for this woolen burden. There's a term used in old records, blanket weight. It wasn't scientific, just something people understood. A good blanket should press on you a little. Not crush you, not trap you, but settle on you, like a safe hand holding you still. Does that sound familiar? Modern weighted blankets for anxiety relief? Perhaps our ancestors knew more than we gave them credit for. Now, not all wool was created equal. There were finer wools, merino, if you could get it. But for most commoners, the wool came from coarse breeds, local and rugged. The kind of sheep that didn't mind the cold and definitely didn't mind if you trimmed their fleece with a dull knife. The result? Wool that was warm, yes, but thick, wiry, stubborn. It resisted dye. It shed fibres. And yet, it was magic. I once came across a story, possibly apocryphal but lovely all the same, of a monk in 13th century France who would not sleep unless his blanket was rough enough to wake the spirit. He believed the itching reminded him of life, of purpose. Whether that's true or poetic nonsense, I'll leave it to you. But I like the idea that even a scratchy blanket had meaning. Children would sometimes complain. You can imagine it, can't you? "Mama, it itches." And she'd say, "That means it's working." As if the discomfort were part of the warmth. And maybe in some strange way it was. Because when you've worked all day and you slide under that itchy shell, it's yours. You've earned it. And its weight. It grounds you. Let your mind wander now. You're in a medieval cottage. The fire is low. The air is still. Outside, the wind whistles through the trees. Maybe there's snow falling. Maybe just frost gathering on the ground. But inside, wrapped in this woolen cocoon, you feel protected. The fibres prickle your skin. They cling to your tunic. But slowly, your body warms. The fibres soften. The itch fades. And sleep comes the way it always does, slow and certain. You turn, just slightly. The blanket follows. There's a tug, a pull. It resettles itself like an old dog finding the perfect place to curl. There's comfort in that, a living weight that adapts, that listens in its own way. In some regions, families shared one blanket, a large one, enough to cover 3 or 4 people sleeping in a row on the floor or on straw pallets. They'd align themselves like spoons, front to back, layering heat. The blankets stretched across them all like a roof. You can picture it, can't you? The gentle breaths of sleep rising and falling in sync beneath that wide woolen stretch. So next time you pull a comforter over your shoulders, think of this. Think of the scratchy, stubborn wool blanket that travelled through centuries. The one that survived fire, flood, fleas, and fashion. The one that people grumbled about and still clung to. The one that, for many, was the only barrier between the cold of the night and the warmth of dreams. As your own room grows quieter and your thoughts begin to slow, imagine that old blanket, thick, rough, and undeniably comforting, draped over you like the memory of someone who's always been there. And as the fire dies out and the world narrows to just your breath and your heartbeat and the soft scrape of wool against skin, let yourself sink. Let the weight hold you, let the scratch remind you that you're alive and safe, and that morning is still hours away. The night wraps the medieval countryside in a heavy, gentle silence. Only the distant rustle of trees and the occasional hoot of an owl remind you that the world outside is still alive. Somewhere on the edge of a small village, a narrow dirt path leads to a modest wooden tavern, the kind that leans just a little in the wind. Its walls are patched with timber and clay, its windows fogged with heat and the sweet smell of roasted grain. Inside, a low fire glows in the hearth, sending ribbons of warmth across the dark room. Wooden tables are scattered unevenly, some sticky with old ale, some smooth with age. The air is thick with the aroma of stewing onions, smoked fish, and a faint undertone of damp wool from the cloaks hung by the door. In a corner, the tavern keeper moves slowly, careful not to wake the few travellers dozing on benches. His feet creak on the wooden planks. On the hearth sits a blackened iron pot, inside which something bubbles quietly. Pottage, a thick, humble stew of barley, cabbage, beans, and a hint of salted pork. This was the closest thing medieval people had to our modern midnight snack, heavy and warm enough to lull a weary body towards second sleep. He takes a wooden ladle and lifts a spoonful to his lips, blowing softly. The taste is earthy, smoky, with a whisper of sweetness from a carrot softened in the broth. It fills the belly with the kind of warmth that makes eyelids heavier. A cat stretches on the bench nearby, curling into a loaf as if mirroring the bread left to warm by the fire. In another corner, a merchant stirs awake from his first sleep. He yawns, rubbing his eyes, and reaches for a cup of warm ale spiced with cloves and honey. The first sip is soft and soothing, coating his throat and releasing a faint, almost floral aroma into the sleepy room. A quiet sigh escapes him. In a world without coffee or bright lights, this is the night's gentle nudge toward either a conversation or a second slumber. The tavern keeper, perhaps out of habit, checks a small wooden box under the counter. Inside are preserved fruits, figs and plums dark as the night sky. He takes one, bites into its chewy sweetness, and lets the syrupy taste linger. This was a luxury snack, a little piece of sunlight saved from summer, now shared with the quiet hours of the night. Outside, the wind brushes against the shutters, and a wagon creaks as it settles in the cold. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once, then falls silent. The village is cocooned in its own rhythm of sleep, watch, and sleep again. And here, in the tavern, the slow dance of night continues. Stew bubbles, embers pop, and the soft murmur of someone mumbling in their dreams fills the room like a lullaby. Time drips slowly. A traveller shifts, pulling a coarse wool blanket higher. Another breathes deeply, his head resting on a rolled-up cloak. In these quiet medieval hours, even eating feels like part of the night's dream, soft, slow, and unhurried. As the fire sighs, casting its orange glow on the walls, the tavern becomes a cradle of sleep. One by one, the few awake souls drift back toward their second rest. The last sound is the faint bubbling of pottage, whispering like a bedtime story to no one in particular. And as this tavern sinks into the stillness of night, let your mind wander. For next, we will slip into a monastery where monks keep vigil in candlelight, and their own strange sleep and snack rituals unfold under the echoes of stone halls. The night air in the medieval monastery was colder than you might expect. Thick stone walls, while strong and silent, seemed to sip the warmth from the room the moment the fire dimmed. Torches in iron sconces flickered faintly along the hallway, their light licking across the uneven stones and casting long, swaying shadows. The monastery was a world within a world, existing quietly while the village beyond lay in the soft embrace of sleep. Here, time followed a different rhythm. Monks rose not to the demands of the sun, but to the call of the bell, a deep, sonorous hum that rolled through the corridors and into the dormitory where straw pallets lined the walls. Around the middle of the night, long after first sleep had folded itself into the dark, the bell signalled matins, the night prayer. Picture a lone monk, Brother Thomas, stirring from his straw mattress. The cold bites first at his nose and fingers. He pulls a rough wool habit over his shoulders and pads barefoot across the icy stones. His breath makes a soft cloud as he walks toward the chapel, guided by the faint glow of beeswax candles. Their scent, rich, sweet and faintly smoky, hangs in the air like an invisible comfort. In the chapel, the soundscape is a lullaby of its own. The soft rustle of robes, the occasional creak of wood as someone kneels, and the echo of a hymn rolling gently up into the vaulted ceiling. Prayers were whispered in Latin, their syllables stretching long and low, a sound like river water over smooth stones. For a listener drifting in and out of wakefulness, it would have felt like a dream, a slow pulse of sound and light. And then came the small ritual that monks rarely spoke of but often practiced, the warm night drink. After prayers, in the kitchen wing of the monastery, a pot of posset sometimes waited, a simple drink of warm milk curdled gently with ale or wine, sweetened with a dab of honey. Its steam rose in the candlelight like a ghostly veil. The monk sipped it slowly, both to ease the body back toward rest and to stave off the cold that seeped in from every corner. Brother Thomas takes a sip, closing his eyes as the warmth spreads through his chest. The taste is rich but soft, like sweet cream kissed with a trace of malt. The warmth carries the mind away, unspooling thoughts as gently as the turning of rosary beads. This was not indulgence. In the monastic world, every act had a quiet purpose, even drinking milk in the dark. Some monks nibbled on simple oatcakes during these hours, the closest thing they had to a cookie. Dry, a little nutty and crumbly, they stuck to the teeth in a way that forced slow chewing. That slowness, too, was a kind of prayer. No rushing, no distraction, only the soft focus of now. Beyond the walls, the countryside slept under a veil of frost. A fox padded silently along the outer wall, pausing to sniff the air. In the distance, a stream whispered under a thin crust of ice. The world was still, and in that stillness the rhythm of first sleep and second sleep turned like a slow wheel. Back in the dormitory, Brother Thomas returned to his straw pallet. He tucked the rough blanket up to his chin and let his eyelids grow heavy. Around him, the breaths of other monks rose and fell in a soft collective hum, like wind through tall grass. Somewhere, a single candle guttered and died, leaving the night to its perfect, unbroken quiet. If you imagine yourself there, stone beneath you, wool against your cheek, the faint taste of honey and milk still on your tongue, you can feel how the medieval world drifted into dreams. Their nights were not empty, but full of small rituals, of warmth against the cold and of sleep that came in waves, gentle and unhurried. And as the last flicker of candlelight vanishes, let your thoughts drift with Brother Thomas into his second sleep. Because ahead, in the next chapter, we will wander to a castle kitchen at night, where noble feasts hide strange bedtime snacks in the shadows of stone. The castle at night is a world of its own. High walls and heavy gates guard against the world outside, and inside, the cold stone corridors echo with the faintest whispers, your own footsteps, the drip of water from the leaky roof tile, the occasional shuffle of a guard changing post. Most of the torches have been extinguished, leaving only a few lanterns burning like golden islands in a sea of darkness. but if you follow the scent of warmth and life, you will eventually find yourself in the castle kitchen, the heart of the fortress after the dining halls have gone silent. The air here is thicker, sweeter, touched with the memory of roasted meats and fresh bread baked earlier in the day. Tonight the kitchen is mostly empty. A single servant moves slowly across the flagstone floor, careful not to wake the sleeping dogs or the other scullery workers who have curled up by the hearth. She's here to tend the fire, to keep the embers alive, and perhaps, as many did, to enjoy a secret midnight bite. The kitchen is alive with the smells of its history. Smoked bacon hanging from the beams, garlic braids twisting in the cool air, and the faint tang of aging cheese from the pantry. On the large wooden table lies the leftover feast from earlier. Hunks of brown bread, a wedge of hard cheese, a roasted partridge picked clean on one side but still glistening on the other. She cuts a piece of bread and holds it over the embers, letting the surface warm and crisp just enough to soften the stale crust. A thin curl of steam rises, carrying the smell of toasted grain. Then she takes a small slice of cheese and places it on top, letting it melt ever so slightly in the glow of the fire. It's the closest thing to a medieval grilled cheese, humble and perfect in the quiet of the night. From a small crock she scoops pottage, a thick mixture of lentils, leeks and scraps of meat, and lets it warm gently on the coals. The spoon scrapes softly against the pot, the sound barely louder than the soft sigh of wind through the cracks in the kitchen shutters. Outside, somewhere in the castle yard, a horse stamps its hoof once, and then all is still again. The rhythm of the night here is slow. In a world without clocks, time is measured in the dimming of embers, the quiet of corridors and the gentle fading of moonlight through narrow windows. After a small meal, servants and guards alike would often drift into second sleep, sometimes right where they sat. A stool, a corner by the fire, or even the edge of a flour sack became a cradle in the soft hum of the castle night. In the great hall above, the noble family sleeps on feather mattresses under heavy woolen blankets, the last of the candles extinguished. Only the faint light of the moon touches the tapestries and glints off goblets left from the evening's feast. A soft snore echoes through the stone like a distant slow drum. Our servant eats her quiet meal, bread warm, cheese soft, stew rich and heavy, then leans against the wall, letting the firelight paint her face with gold. She listens to the pop of an ember, the drip of melted fat from the spit above, and the low, steady breathing of the sleeping dogs. It's a lullaby made of stone and fire, carrying her gently toward the edge of sleep. In this moment, the castle feels like it belongs entirely to the night. No feasts, no shouting, no clatter of armor or stomping of boots, just the soft inhale and exhale of a building resting, like a giant asleep. And as her eyelids flutter and the spoon slips from her hand, the chapter of the castle kitchen closes softly. Soon, she too will drift into her second sleep, wrapped in the warmth of the kitchen's heart, as the world beyond the walls remains still and dreaming. Next, we'll slip into the streets of a medieval city at night, where candlelit windows and the smell of roasted chestnuts tell a story of wandering night souls and their quiet, sleepy rituals. The streets of a medieval city at night were alive in their own hushed, secret way. Cobblestones held the day's warmth, and the air carried the mingled scents of wood smoke, damp stone, and faint traces of roasting chestnuts from the market that had only just closed. By day, the city roared with merchants, horses, and the clatter of carts. But now, under the moon's silver gaze, it breathed in slow, quiet rhythms, as though the entire town had drawn a blanket over itself. A lantern swings at the corner, its flame licking the glass with a soft hiss whenever the wind dares to nudge it. In the narrow alleys, shadows pool like water, and only the soft drip of rain from eaves reminds you that the city is alive at all. A watchman trudges along, the iron tip of his spear tapping softly with every step. His eyes are heavy from first sleep, and soon he will curl under a cloak against a wall for his second rest, the rhythm of medieval life guiding him as predictably as the tides. But there are others awake at this hour, people with reasons as old as the city itself. The bakers, of course, have already stoked their ovens, follow the faint toasty aroma, and you'll find a small shop where the heat radiates into the empty street. Inside, a man yawns as he slides around loaves of rye bread into a brick oven, the crusts catching the firelight like tiny suns. He works in silence except for the soft shuffle of flour on the table and the occasional crunch of a crusty scrap disappearing into his mouth. Night baking was a ritual as much as a necessity, and he often paired it with a small mug of warm ale or watered wine, just enough to keep the chill of night from settling in his bones. Across the street, a street vendor who hadn't sold all his roasted chestnuts sits near his dying brazier. He cracks a shell and pops a warm, soft nut into his mouth. It's sweet and smoky, the kind of flavour that feels like it comes from the heart of the fire itself. For a moment he leans back against the wall, staring at the moonlit clouds, letting the warmth in his hands and stomach lull him toward drowsiness. From a second-story window a faint light glows, a weaver perhaps, who woke from first sleep and decided to tend to a half-finished cloth. She hums softly as her shuttle slides, the rhythmic clack of wood against wood a lullaby for anyone wandering below. The sound is almost like rain tapping against the roof, steady and hypnotic. In another alley, the smell changes. Yeast, vinegar, and smoke all mingling. A small alehouse keeps a single lamp burning for the handful of night wanderers who need warmth. Inside, two men sit by the fire, sharing a plate of fried scraps of dough, greasy, soft, and dusted with a pinch of salt. They chew slowly, leaning into the comfort of shared silence, their heads nodding towards second sleep. Above them, the rafters creak softly, and the night breathes through the thatch. The city, despite its walls and towers, is porous to the night air, and you can feel the cool breath of the world slip through every gap. Yet it's soothing, as if the entire place exhales with you. The longer you wander, the softer the city becomes. The lanterns sway slower, the fires dim lower, and the footsteps of the last stragglers fade. Even the dogs, who barked earlier at shadows, now curl in doorways, chests rising and falling in time with the great sleeping heart of the town. And as you drift with these streets, hearing the whisper of a river in the distance, smelling the faint perfume of smoke and bread, you begin to feel the same weight that pulls at every eyelid, every shoulder. This is the hour when first sleep has passed, and second sleep waits to fold the city into its arms. Somewhere, a chestnut vendor's brazier sputters its last coal. A baker leans on his elbows, eyes closing for just a moment before the rooster crows. The city is a cradle now, rocking itself gently through the quiet hours waiting for the light. And as we leave these moonlit streets behind, our next wandering step will take us to a lonely farmhouse, where sleep and supper meet in the simplest, coziest ways imaginable. The farmhouse stands alone on the gentle slope of a hill, its dark roof glistening faintly with dew under the starlight. Far from the clustered safety of the village, the night here feels wider, quieter, and more alive with the soft murmurs of the countryside. The wind rolls across open fields like an invisible tide, carrying the scent of damp soil, hay, and the faint musk of animals resting in their pens. A single candle burns in the small wooden window, flickering with each sigh of the wind. Inside, the warmth is immediate, wrapping around you like a woolen blanket. The farmhouse kitchen is the heart of the home. A low fire hums in the hearth, casting its glow across clay jars, wooden spoons, and the rough-hewn table scarred with years of use. The family has already settled into first sleep. A few snores drift down from the loft above, mingling with the occasional cluck of a restless chicken or the soft, sleepy snort of the pig outside. But one figure is awake, a farmer's wife, stirring from habit or hunger. She moves slowly, her bare feet soft against the cold wooden floor, and tends to the embers with a practiced hand. The kitchen smells of grain, smoke and milk, the timeless perfume of rural life. On a shelf nearby rests a small pot of oat gruel, thick and pale, left to soak in warm water since supper. She lifts the lid, stirs it gently, and adds a drizzle of honey, a treasured sweetness saved from summer hives. The aroma blooms in the warm air, earthy oats and golden sugar, a scent that hums with comfort, She takes a wooden spoonful and tastes slowly, letting the warmth linger. This was more than food. It was a ritual that carried her softly from wakefulness back towards second sleep. Many rural folk followed this pattern, eating small warm snacks between their two nightly slumbers, believing it soothed the belly and kept dreams gentle. Outside, the night stretches wide. A barn owl glides silently past the moon, and somewhere in the distance a dog barks once and then settles. Beyond the fields, a creek gurgles softly, a lullaby in silver ripples. The world is wrapped in a quilt of sound so gentle you could almost mistake it for silence. The farmer's wife ladles a small portion of gruel into a clay bowl and sits by the hearth. The crackle of the fire is the only companion to the soft scrape of her spoon. Occasionally a log pops, sending a tiny spark into the dark. The rhythm of night is unbroken. Eat, breathe, sigh, listen. Even the shadows seem drowsy here, stretching slowly along the walls, as if they too are sinking into rest. She glances toward the loft where her family sleeps. Her husband is curled near the wall, one hand dangling toward the ladder. The children are bundled in their shared bed, their soft breaths filling the space like tiny waves on a shore. In this quiet moment, she feels the weight of the day lift from her shoulders. She finishes her small snack and rinses the bowl in the water bucket, the gentle splash echoing in the still room. Then she lowers herself onto a low bench, pulls a rough wool blanket around her, and closes her eyes. The warmth of the gruel lingers in her belly, the firelight flickers behind her eyelids, and the night hums her back towards second sleep. Outside, the farmhouse stands like a soft, breathing island in the ocean of night. The fields sway under the stars, and the distant hills cradle the silence. By the time the moon has drifted west, the entire world here is asleep again, deep, slow, and content. And as the farmhouse dreams, let your own thoughts drift. For next, we will wander into the harbour of a medieval port where sailors and night watchmen keep their own sleepy traditions alive under the smell of salt and tar. The harbour at night is a different world. It breathes slowly, like a tired giant finally at rest after a long day. In the dim silver of the moon, the water glistens and ripples with a soft rhythm, nudging against the weathered piers in a language only the sea and wood understand. The timber groans softly, and the ropes that tie the ships creak, stretching and relaxing with every gentle shift of the tide. The medieval city that hugs this harbour has gone mostly dark. The market stalls are empty, their wooden frames casting long, thin shadows across the cobbled streets. The smell of the day lingers faintly. Smoke from the hearths, fish from the docks, a whisper of spilled ale from the tavern. But now the air is fresher, washed with the briny perfume of the sea. A lone lantern swings on the pier, and its reflection dances in the water like a golden ghost. Around it, the blackness of the sea swallows the light in soft ripples. A single gull calls, low and almost questioning before silence folds over the harbour again. Follow the creak of boards to a small watch hut where the night watchmen spend their long hours. Inside, a tiny brazier glows, a fragile heart of warmth in the cool night. Two men huddle near it, cloaks wrapped around their shoulders, their breath visible in the firelight. One stirs a pot of stew, the other cradles a mug of warm ale that smells faintly of cloves. The stew is simple but comforting. Bits of salted fish, chopped onions, a carrot or two if the kitchen boy remembered, and the inevitable pinch of barley that makes it thick and filling. Its aroma fills the small hut, a sleepy perfume that blends perfectly with the smoky air. Each bubble in the pot pops with a soft plip, and every now and then a tiny puff of steam escapes the lid, curling toward the low ceiling. One of the watchmen dips a wooden spoon into the pot and lifts it carefully. He blows on it, the steam swirling in the faint lamplight, then sips. The warmth travels down his throat like a gentle river, settling in his belly with a heavy, slow comfort. His eyes close briefly, almost betraying him to sleep, but the soft creak of the water wheel outside brings him back. A sailor approaches from the dock, boots damp from the mist. He nods without a word and is handed a piece of dark rye bread. He dips it in the stew and chews slowly, the taste salty and smoky, perfectly matched to the night air. Around them, the harbour murmurs, water lapping, ropes sighing, wood knocking softly against wood. It's a lullaby made from tide and timber. Farther along the pier, a young cabin boy is curled against a coil of rope, using his arm as a pillow. His small lantern flickers beside him, illuminating his face in soft gold. The smell of salt and tar surrounds him, mingled with the faint sweetness of dried figs tucked in his pocket, a little treasure for the night. He yawns, takes a tiny bite and lets the chewy sweetness linger as he watches the stars. In minutes, the rhythm of the harbour will rock him into his second sleep. High above, the masts of the ship sway gently like black silhouettes against the night sky. The wind flutters the furled sails, and a faint whistle hums through the rigging, a song only the sea knows. Every sound is soft, patient, unhurried, perfect for the slow slide into sleep. Even the city beyond seems to sleep to this rhythm. In the alleys near the docks, a single tavern still glows, the muffled laughter inside fading with each passing minute. Soon even that will dim, leaving the harbour in perfect peace. The watchmen finish their meal, tucking their cloaks tighter, and lean against the wall. The fire sighs low, and the warmth of stew and ale spreads through their bodies like a slow tide. One man's head droops just for a moment, and he imagines the sea's gentle rocking pulling him into a dream. Outside, the lantern light trembles on the black water, and the whole harbour seems to sway in time with the night. Somewhere in the distance, the river mouth gurgles softly into the open sea. The sound blends with the creak of wood and the soft slap of water, creating a symphony for sleep. As the moon slides toward the horizon and the stars thin above the black line of water, the harbour exhales and surrenders to the quiet. Only the sea remains awake, rocking the world toward dawn. And in that rhythm, as your mind drifts with the tide, we leave the harbour behind, and next we will step into a herbalist's cottage, where warm brews and the soft perfume of drying flowers guide the night into its gentlest dreams. The herbalist's cottage sits on the edge of the medieval village, where the last of the thatched roofs give way to open meadows. At night it almost vanishes into the darkness, its low shape blending with the sleeping earth, save for the thin ribbon of smoke rising from its chimney. The moon spills silver across the thatch, and the soft hum of crickets carries on the breeze. Step closer, and the scent greets you before the door does. Dried lavender, chamomile, rosemary and mint all whisper their presence in the night air, a perfume that clings to the little garden outside. Even with the world asleep, the plants sway softly, their leaves catching starlight. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks once, and then the meadow returns to its patient, sleepy hum. The wooden door creaks as it opens, revealing a room lit only by the glow of embers and a few stubs of beeswax candles. The air is warm, heavy with the aroma of herbs and simmering honey water. Bundles of flowers and leaves hang upside down from the rafters, their shadows long and delicate against the low ceiling. Inside, the herbalist, an elderly woman wrapped in a dark wool shawl, moves in unhurried circles. Her feet make no sound on the packed earth floor as she stirs a small iron pot over the coals. Inside, a sleeping draught brews warm goat's milk with a spoon of honey, a pinch of ground poppy seed, and a few sprigs of chamomile. Steam coils upward like a ghost, carrying with it a drowsy sweetness. She hums softly to herself as she works, the tune somewhere between a lullaby and a prayer. The crackle of the fire answers her, filling the room with a slow rhythm that could make even the most restless heart grow heavy. On a low wooden table, small clay jars hold treasures of the season. Powdered valerian root for calming nerves, crushed mint for queasy stomachs, lavender petals for gentle sleep. Each jar wears a thin layer of dust, proof that this cottage has rocked many nights into peace. Tonight she prepares a cup for herself. Her fingers move with the ritual of repetition, scooping, stirring, and pouring without haste. She lifts the warm cup to her lips and inhales. The steam smells of summer fields, of sun and soil and buzzing bees. One slow sip and the warmth seeps through her chest like the slow tide of comfort. She takes a seat by the narrow window where the night peers in. Outside, fireflies drift over the meadow, tiny lanterns swaying in the darkness. An owl glides silently overhead, its shadow briefly cutting across the moonlight. She watches, sips again, and lets the quiet of the world soak into her bones. Occasionally, a villager will knock at her door even in the night, someone waking from first sleep, uneasy or stiff, seeking a little comfort. She always answers, never rushed. Tonight a young shepherd appears, hat in hand, shivering in the chill. He speaks softly of aching legs and troubled dreams. She nods, prepares a cup, and sprinkles in a pinch of ground fennel and honey. He drinks slowly, and the heaviness settles over him like a second blanket. His shoulders lower, his eyes soften, and by the time he leaves, the night has claimed him once more. She knows he will sink into second sleep before he reaches his door. In the cottage, the fire grows low, painting the walls in a warm orange haze. The herbalist leans back in her chair, cup empty now, and listens. The world is a song of small sounds, the soft drip of condensation, the occasional pop of a drying herb, the sigh of wind against the walls. It is the kind of music that tucks you into dreams without you ever noticing. Finally, she lowers her head to the table, wrapped in her own shawl. The smell of chamomile and beeswax fills her breath. Her eyes close slowly, and the cottage joins the night in its perfect, unbroken quiet. Far outside, the meadow hums, the fireflies sway, and the village sleeps on, wrapped in the gentle arms of the medieval dark. And as the last coal glows faintly in the herbalist's hearth, let your mind drift with her into second sleep. For our next wandering will take us to the quiet stables of a noble estate, where the animals themselves keep their own sleepy watch over the night. The stables of a noble estate at night are a world of warm breath, soft rustling hay, and the muted heartbeat of life moving slowly in the dark. Outside, the estate sleeps beneath the heavy velvet of the medieval night. The manor house looms silent, its stone walls silvered by moonlight, and the gardens lie still, only the whisper of leaves acknowledging the gentle push of wind. But here, inside the stable, time stretches differently. The smell of hay, earth and horse mixes into a perfume that is both grounding and drowsy. It clings to the timber beams, to the old leather tack hanging neatly from pegs, to the straw-strewn floor that muffles every step. Lanterns swing softly from hooks along the walls, their flames waltzing in the slow rhythm of the breeze, sending shadows climbing over beams like lazy cats. Horses doze in their stalls, their great bodies swaying almost imperceptibly with each deep breath. Every now and then one snorts softly, sending a puff of warm mist into the lantern glow, or stamps a hoof in a sleepy, half-conscious dream. The sound is gentle and repetitive, a meditative pattern of breath, shuffle, snort, silence. If you stand still long enough, it feels like the whole stable is breathing with you. In a far corner, the stable boy stirs. He's a small figure wrapped in a rough wool blanket, curled on a bed of straw. His first sleep is over, and the cool air has pulled him from dreams. His hair is messy, dusted with hay, and he yawns so wide it makes his eyes water. He pulls himself to sit, rubbing his arms for warmth, and reaches for the bucket of warm mash he prepared earlier. The mash smells faintly of molasses and oats, a smell that lulls the horses into their own contentment. He stirs it with a wooden spoon, the thick slosh echoing softly in the stall, and offers a handful to the nearest mare. She leans forward, lips twitching, and takes it with a soft huff, her warm breath wrapping his cold fingers in mist. The stable boy laughs quietly to himself, a sound almost swallowed by the night. He chews on a crust of stale bread he saved from supper, dipping it briefly in the warm mash before biting. It's coarse, bland, but soft now with heat. In this quiet, even the simplest food feels like comfort. He sits on his straw bed, swinging his legs slowly, letting the horse's rhythm lull him toward drowsiness again. Beyond the stalls, the estate grounds are hushed, but not silent. Somewhere in the orchard, a night bird calls once. In the distance, a dog sighs in its sleep. dreaming perhaps of the day's run. The occasional flicker of movement at the edge of the lantern light betrays a mouse darting from straw to shadow. Even these tiny lives move gently, as if the whole world is trying not to disturb the night. The stable smells like stories, the leather darkened by years of hands and weather, the wood soaked in rain and sun, the straw fresh with the faint sweetness of the fields. The boy lies back, watching the lantern swing slowly, its light tracing invisible circles on the ceiling beams. The mare lowers her head near him, her ears twitching, as if listening to the same slow lullaby. He takes a final nibble of his bread and pulls the wool blanket tighter, letting his body sink into the straw. He hears the slow chew of the horses, the distant hoot of an owl, and the soft pat of rain beginning to tap the thatch above. Each sound is like a stitch in a heavy, warm quilt of night. His eyelids droop, and second sleep begins to pull him back under, soft as the belly of a kitten. By the time the lantern burns low, and the horses are deep in their own dreams, the stable has become a cradle. The boy, the animals, the flicker of the last ember, all of it rocks together in a rhythm older than the manor itself. Outside, the rain whispers to the earth, and the estate, wrapped in its cocoon of sleep, lets the night carry it forward without a ripple. And as the last of the warmth settles, the stables fade into that velvet darkness, where only the soft sigh of life remains. From here, our wandering steps will next take us to a lonely roadside inn, where travellers and their strange midnight habits give us yet another glimpse into the quiet rituals of medieval sleep. The roadside inn rests along a lonely medieval road, a simple timber structure hunched against the wind, with its thatched roof dark under the moonlight. It has been a long day for every traveller who stopped here, the kind of day of clattering carts, muddy boots, and the slow, endless roll of countryside under grey skies. And now, as the deep night folds itself over the land, the inn exhales softly like an old man settling into a chair. From the outside, it looks almost abandoned. A single lantern sways above the wooden sign, the iron bracket creaking gently in the wind. The warm smell of wood smoke escapes through gaps in the shutters, mingling with the damp, earthy scent of the road. Step closer and you hear it. The muffled crackle of a fire, the soft murmur of sleeping life beyond the walls. Inside, the inn is dim and golden. A large stone hearth dominates the main room, and in it logs burn down to glowing embers. Their faint pop and hiss fill the quiet space with a sleepy rhythm. Wooden tables sit scattered, some sticky from ale, some scarred by knives and tankards. On the benches, travellers sleep curled in cloaks, their heads resting on folded arms or travel bags. The smell of wool, leather, smoke, and faintly of roasted meat drifts together into a cosy, heavy perfume. Behind the counter, the innkeeper moves slowly, his step soft on the creaking boards. His night is a ritual he knows by heart. Check the fire, cover the bread, and sip from a cup of thin ale sweetened with honey to keep the chill away. He glances at the travellers, smiling faintly at their different sleeping poses. One man snoring into his elbow, another slumped against the wall, a young boy with his feet dangling off the bench like a rag doll. At this hour, the inn's life is hushed but not gone. The kitchen is still warm from the day's cooking. A small pot of pottage simmers slowly over the embers, thick with lentils, onions, and a scrap of salted pork. The smell is earthy and comforting, a whisper of nourishment that makes stomachs rumble even in dreams. Beside it, on the edge of the hearth, flatbread slices are laid to warm, edges curling as the heat seeps in. A late traveller stumbles in from the road, cloak damp with dew. The innkeeper greets him with a nod rather than words, and the man sinks onto a bench near the fire. A steaming cup of spiced milk is placed in his hands, an old trick to lull weary bodies into second sleep. The steam carries the scent of cinnamon and honey. He takes a slow sip and a shiver leaves his shoulders. From the rafters above you can hear the soft rustle of straw as a cat moves, looking for its warmest corner. In the stable outside, a horse shifts and snorts in its own slumber. The whole inn is a small breathing organism, creaks and sighs, warmth and shadow, all moving at the pace of sleep. As the hours creep forward, the room seems to shrink into itself. Lanterns burn lower, the fire sighs, and the distant sounds of the road, wind, crickets, a lone barking dog become a soft blur. The inn feels like a cradle now, rocking all who enter toward the gentlest oblivion. One by one, the few who are awake drift into their second sleep. The innkeeper leans back against the wall, his own eyelids heavy. The last thing he hears before slipping under is the slow crackle of the hearth and the whisper of wind at the shutter. And outside, the night presses close. The road is empty, the sky pale with stars, and the inn glows like a single ember in the vast, sleeping countryside. Here, the world has slowed to a perfect whisper, and time itself curls up in the straw to rest. Next, our wandering path will lead us to a quiet medieval bathhouse, where steam, water, and soft echoes create a nighttime ritual of warmth and drowsy comfort. The medieval bathhouse at night is a place of warmth and whispering echoes, tucked away from the chill that lingers in the streets outside. From a distance, it looks like a simple timber and stone building, half hidden by the night. Smoke curls lazily from a small chimney, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and steaming herbs into the cool air. The moonlight glints off wet cobblestones leading to the door, where drops of water trail like tiny stars from the last visitors. Step inside and the world changes. Steam rolls across the room in gentle waves, making the candlelight quiver. The warmth wraps around you instantly, soft and heavy, almost like a blanket fresh from the hearth. Your breath slows without thinking. Here, the night moves at a different rhythm, slower than a heartbeat, older than a lullaby. The bathhouse is quiet now. Only a few night bathers remain, lingering in the soft glow. Wooden tubs line the walls, their rims damp and smooth from years of use. The surface of the water shimmers in the flickering candlelight, occasionally disturbed by a single ripple as someone shifts in drowsy comfort. Above, the wooden beams drip softly, the sound of condensed steam falling in a patient, irregular rhythm. An attendant moves silently across the floor, bare feet making no sound against the damp planks. He carries a bucket of hot water, its surface smoking, and pours it gently into a tub. The hiss of heat meeting cooler water echoes softly, and the room smells suddenly of wet stone and the faint bitterness of boiled herbs. Rosemary and thyme, meant to ease sore muscles and invite sleep. In one corner, a merchant rests with his head tilted back, eyes closed. His journey has been long, and the warmth of the water seeps into his bones. He lets out a low sigh, the kind that comes only from letting go of weight carried too long. His fingers float on the surface of the water, and each slow breath sends a ripple outward, as if the tub itself is breathing with him. On a low bench near the wall, a tray of simple snacks waits for those who rise from the baths. In medieval times, late-night bathers often sipped warm spiced wine or honeyed ale and nibbled on dried figs or soft bread dipped in milk. A young woman reaches for a piece of bread now, the crust softened from sitting near the steam, and takes a small, sleepy bite. The taste is warm and faintly sweet, and her shoulders sink lower as the comfort seeps through her. The acoustics of the bathhouse are soft and strange. Every small sound bounces, carrying like a whisper through the steam. A drop of water falls. Someone exhales. A log in the stove pops and shifts. The silence here is alive, layered with sounds that soothe instead of startle. One of the attendants takes a moment to sit by the low fire that keeps the water warm. He cradles a small cup of hot herb tea, a simple mix of mint and chamomile. The steam curls up against his face, carrying the scent of fields in bloom and summer air long gone. He takes a sip, lets the warmth pool in his chest, and his head tips forward, just for a moment, caught in the gentle pull of the night. In the farthest tub, an elderly farmer leans against the wooden rim, eyes half shut. He hums a fragment of a folk song, low, tuneless but comforting. It blends with the faint trickle of water from a nearby spout and the distant sigh of wind sneaking under the door. Slowly the farmer's humming fades into a drowsy silence, his chin dipping toward his chest. Around him, the bathhouse seems to breathe. Steam swirls lazily, curling through the lantern light. Shadows on the walls stretch and yawn. The warmth, the water, the scent of herbs, they weave together like a thick quilt draped over the mind, inviting anyone who lingers here to slide into second sleep as easily as slipping beneath the surface of the bath itself. Outside, the streets are silent. The last candle in a nearby window goes out. Even the night birds have grown quiet. Within these walls, the medieval world rests in a cocoon of steam and warmth, guarded by nothing but the rhythm of water and the slow turn of time. When the final candle gutters, the bathhouse holds its breath for a moment, then settles into perfect stillness. The last ripples on the water smooth out, and the room seems to dream with its few drowsy occupants. And as that warmth fades into your imagination, our wandering next takes us to the quiet upper floors of a medieval guild hall, where merchants and apprentices share benches, snores, and sleepy rituals beneath heavy timber beams. The guild hall of a medieval town is different at night than in the bustling daylight hours. By day, it is a world of boots thudding against wood, of haggling voices, of the sharp smell of ink and wax as merchants and scribes conduct their business under the watchful gaze of carved beams and painted crests. But now, as night folds across the town, the guild hall exhales all that noise and grows heavy with a drowsy golden silence. The hall itself is long and high-ceilinged, a cavern of oak beams and shadow. In the quiet, the wood seems to creak like an old man stretching, as if the building, relieved of the day's business, is finally at rest. Shafts of moonlight spill through the narrow upper windows, landing in pale stripes across the floor, while lanterns burn low along the walls, their flames bowing to the slow draught that snakes through the hall. Down the center of the room, the great table is littered with the remains of the day, quills and parchment, half-burned candles, and a few crumbs of bread and cheese left behind by the last merchants who dined here before drifting off to their first sleep. A soft, sweet smell lingers, the ghost of spiced wine and baked pies now cooled to memory. In one corner of the hall, a fireplace glows. Its logs are mostly embers now, pulsing like the faint heartbeat of the hall. The fire crackles occasionally, each soft pop echoing in the emptiness. Near the hearth, two apprentices doze, curled up in their cloaks on low benches. One snores faintly, the other mutters in his sleep, perhaps dreaming of ledgers and coin chests. Not everyone in the guild hall sleeps straight through the night. Second sleep waits like a familiar friend, but in the gap between the first and second slumber, small rituals play out. A senior merchant, grey-haired and stoop-shouldered, stirs awake in his chair. He reaches for a jug of watered ale, pours it into a wooden cup and takes a slow sip, letting the taste of barley and faint smoke coat his tongue. His free hand picks at a hunk of brown bread, dipping it into the last of the cooled broth from supper. The hall smells of old wood, cooling ashes and food stored in corners, dried fish, smoked sausage, and the dusty perfume of grains. These scents cling to the air, soft and comforting in the way that a space lived in for decades carries its own memory. Somewhere above, pigeons coo softly in the rafters, shifting in their nests. A mouse scurries across the floor, pausing to sniff at the crumbs by the ledger table. None of this breaks the rhythm of the hall. It only adds to it, a small, steady orchestra of night sounds blending with the soft breathing of sleeping men. As the merchant eats, he hums under his breath, a fragment of a trade song from years ago, more vibration than melody. He pulls his cloak tighter and leans back, staring at the play of firelight on the ceiling beams, where the carved emblems of the guild seem to nod in the flicker. His mind drifts over the day, then over nothing at all. The quiet rituals of this midnight hour have a soothing weight. The scrape of wood as he shifts his bench closer to the fire, the soft thump of his cup as it meets the table, or the hiss of an ember collapsing into ash. Every detail is patient, deliberate, unhurried, the way life in the medieval night always seemed to flow. Outside, the town sleeps on. The streets are empty, save for a stray dog curled by a doorway and the distant sound of the river moving under the bridge. Occasionally, the wind slips through the shutters, carrying the faintest scent of the cold night air, and the merchant exhales slowly, letting his eyes grow heavier. He stretches out on the bench using a folded cloak as a pillow and listens. the breathing of his apprentices, the whisper of the embers, the low creak of the hall settling deeper into sleep. The great guild hall, which had roared with voices and clatter hours before, is now a cradle, rocking its few remaining souls towards second sleep. By the time the last lantern sputters, the hall is nearly dark. Only the memory of fire glows, painting the edges of the room in faint orange. The carved beams and banners fade into shadow, and the guild hall, a silent witness to the night, dreams alongside its keepers. In the distance, a church bell tolls softly, signalling the slow turn of the night, and all within the hall sink further into the arms of rest. The medieval world hums on outside, but here, within these walls, sleep holds dominion until the first grey light of dawn. And as the guild hall drifts into its second deeper slumber, let us step quietly away. For our next wandering will lead us into a medieval watchtower at night, where lonely sentinels keep their vigil, and the rhythm of sleep and wake is tested against the pull of duty and the whispers of the dark. The watchtower rises against the night like a lone finger pointing to the stars, its stone walls cold and damp from the day's mist. High above the sleeping medieval town, it keeps its quiet vigil. By day, it is a place of noise and routine. Guards coming and going, flags snapping in the wind, the clatter of boots on spiral stairs. But at night, in the slow stretch between first sleep and second, the watchtower is a world of echoes, whispers, and the soft weight of isolation. Climb the spiral staircase, and the night opens around you. The stones are cool beneath your hands, rough and pitted from years of weather and footsteps. The only sounds are the dull thud of your boots, and the occasional drip of water that snakes down from some unseen crack above. A faint smell of damp moss lingers in the narrow stairwell, mixing with the dry, smoky perfume of torches that burned hours ago. At the top, the watchroom waits, a small round chamber with narrow slits for windows and a low fire flickering in a corner brazier. The air is different here, thin, cold, and touched with the scent of smoke and iron. A single guard sits hunched on a stool, cloak wrapped tight, staring out into the sea of dark beyond the walls. His breath clouds the air, and the faint light of the coals paints his face in tired gold. Outside the slit windows, the world is almost soundless. The village below is black and still, its thatched roofs barely visible in the moonlight. In the distance, the river glimmers like a piece of spilled silver, and the faintest hoot of an owl drifts on the wind. Every now and then the guard shifts his weight, the leather of his boots creaking, and the tower answers with a long, soft groan. He keeps a small wooden cup of warm ale beside him, laced with a spoonful of honey to fight the chill. Every sip is slow, deliberate. He chews a piece of dried bread, hard and crusty, letting it soften in his mouth before swallowing. The taste is plain, but in the lonely hours it feels like a companion. Guards often kept simple night rations, a strip of salted meat, a bit of cheese, or a few dried figs tucked into a pouch, to keep them awake while the rest of the world slept. From the parapet the night stretches forever. Frost glitters faintly on the stones, and the wind curls around the tower, whistling in a low, hollow note. Below, the trees sway slowly, and beyond them, the open fields are a soft blur of shadow and silver light, somewhere far. Wolf howls once, and the sound seems to slide along the wind, slipping through the cracks of the night. The guard's eyes grow heavy, but he knows the rhythm of medieval sleep well. He will nap in short bursts, leaning against the cold wall, waking to check the dark horizon, then letting his head droop again. First sleep is long gone. This is the hour when half-dreams and soft wakefulness trade places. Inside the tower, the fire pops softly, throwing small sparks that die before they touch the stone floor. Shadows dance like slow ghosts on the walls, stretching and bending with each flicker. The guard's mind drifts, lulled by the pattern of wind, crackle, and distant night calls. Every so often, he climbs to the highest platform where the wind bites sharper and the moon seems closer. From here, he can see the entire medieval night breathing, the tiny isolated lights of cottages, the faint glow of a dying inn fire, and the wide black silhouette of the hills beyond. All of it is silent, patient, timeless. He leans on the cold stone, takes a last bite of his dried bread, and lets the night seep into his bones. Back inside, the brazier grows dim, and the tower joins the rest of the world in its slow, drowsy sway. In this small, round room, the rhythm of second sleep hovers like a soft mist, wrapping the lone guard and his tower in the perfect stillness of the medieval night. And as the fire sighs its last ember, the watchtower drifts into that gentle state between wake and sleep, keeping vigil in silence. From here, our next step will lead us to a sleepy blacksmith's forge at night, where even the tools and iron seem to hum in the low warmth of slumber. The blacksmith's forge at night is a place you might not expect to hold such deep quiet. By day it is alive with sound and heat, the clang of hammers, the roar of bellows, the smell of burning charcoal and sharp metal, but at night, in the long hours between first sleep and second, the forge exhales and becomes a cathedral of soft echoes and cooling iron. The air outside is crisp, touched with the faint scent of smoke and damp earth. The moon spills pale light over the sloping roof of the workshop, glinting faintly off the metal tools hanging outside the door. Crickets sing softly in the grass, and somewhere far away a dog barks once and then settles back into the rhythm of sleep. Push open the heavy wooden door, and you enter a world held in amber warmth. The forge fire is banked, no longer roaring but glowing deep in its bed of coals. Its slow, pulsing light throws long, drowsy shadows across the walls, where hammers, tongs and chisels hang in neat rows like slumbering sentinels. A faint metallic tang lingers in the air, mingling with the rich, smoky aroma of wood and ash. In the corner, the blacksmith himself has found his nighttime rhythm. He sits on a low stool, a wool blanket draped over his shoulders, leaning against a post with a half-empty mug of warm ale beside him. The mug smells faintly of honey and cloves, a small comfort against the cool draughts that snake through the gaps in the planks. His boots are dusty, his hands rough and dark with soot, but in this moment, everything is still. He nibbles a piece of bread, coarse and crusty, dipping it briefly into a shallow bowl of lukewarm onion broth left from supper. The bread softens just enough to chew slowly, and he savours the warmth, letting it sink into his belly like a soft weight. Blacksmiths often kept simple midnight snacks for these quiet hours: dry sausage, a wedge of cheese, sometimes even roasted chestnuts if the season was kind. The sounds of the forge at rest are subtle but hypnotic. A faint tick of metal cooling on the anvil, the soft claps of ash as an ember shifts, the whisper of the wind slipping through the half-shuttered window. Each sound lands like a heartbeat, slow and patient, drawing you deeper into the rhythm of second sleep. Sometimes he will stir the embers with a poker, just enough to wake a flicker of orange flame. The fire hisses and sighs, sending a gentle wave of heat across the room. The light dances on the metal tools, making them look for a moment as if they're alive, glowing faintly with their own memory of the day's work. Above him, rafters creak as the building settles into the night. A sparrow rustles in its nest tucked into the eaves, and somewhere behind the forge a mouse scrambles across a pile of wood shavings before vanishing into a shadow. Even these tiny lives move in soft patterns, part of the slow orchestra of the night. The blacksmith leans back, his mug warm in his hands, and closes his eyes for a moment. He's not fully asleep, not yet. Instead, he drifts in that familiar half-dream state, where the warmth of the fire, the weight of food, and the hum of the quiet forge wrap around his mind like a wool blanket. In his half-dreams, he hears the echo of hammers from the day, but softened, as if underwater. He imagines the tools whispering, the anvil humming a lullaby in the low voice of iron. Even his muscles seem to sigh in relief, the day's labour falling away under the weight of the dark. By the time the final coal glows dim, the blacksmith is curled on his bench, his blanket pulled to his chin, his breath deep and even. The forge, its fire nearly out, holds him the way the earth holds a seed, warm, protected and still. Outside, the village sleeps. Only the occasional flicker of moonlight on iron hints that This place, so alive by day, dreams quietly in the long medieval night. And as the forge exhales into its silence, we step softly toward our next wandering, into the humble hut of a shepherd on the far edge of the fields, where sleep and the open night sky meet in the simplest, most peaceful ritual of all. The shepherd's hut sits at the farthest edge of the fields, where the village lanterns cannot reach, and the rolling hills meet the night sky without interruption. Here the darkness is deep but soft, filled with the muted shimmer of countless stars. The moon hangs low and wide, spilling silver light across the grass, and the air carries the scents of earth, crushed hay, and the faintest trace of wood smoke from distant cottages. All around the night hums gently. Sheep shift in their sleep, their small bells giving a soft, uneven chime. A breeze brushes through the tall grass, whispering against the hut's walls like a sigh. Somewhere far across the hills, an owl calls once and the sound lingers, stretching and dissolving into the quiet. The hut itself is simple, built of rough stone and crooked timber. Its thatched roof is patched and low, and from the crooked chimney a thread of smoke drifts upward, vanishing into the sky. Inside, the warmth greets you first. A low fire burns in the stone hearth, just enough to glow, just enough to keep the chill away. The air is thick with the perfume of lanolin and hay, the earthy smell of wet wool, and the faint tang of smoke. Against the wall is a low bed stuffed with straw and covered in coarse wool blankets, the sort that itch just slightly but hold the body in a heavy, honest warmth. The shepherd is awake. His first sleep ended some time ago, stirred by an instinct older than memory, the pull to check the flock in the dark. He sits on a low stool, elbows resting on his knees, staring into the fire with half-closed eyes. The flames do not dance. They sway lazily, licking the blackened stones with patient rhythm. Beside the hearth, a small clay pot of milk warms slowly. He leans forward, testing the heat with his fingers, then pours it into a wooden cup. He stirs in a spoonful of honey and a pinch of crushed herbs gathered from the hillside, a ritual passed down from his father and his father before him. The steam rises, sweet and grassy, curling against his face. He sips slowly, letting the warmth move down his throat and spread through his chest. The weight of the day begins to slide away, and his eyes grow heavier with every swallow. On a low shelf sits a chunk of coarse barley bread, dark and hard from the cool night air. He dips it in the warm milk before taking a slow bite, chewing until it softens, until the warmth and sweetness settle into his stomach. Outside, the flock murmurs. A lamb bleats softly in its sleep. The soft rhythm of bells and wind and distant water wraps around the hut like a quilt. The shepherd rises and opens the door to the night. The cool air meets the heat of the hut in a silent greeting. He stands in the threshold, blanket around his shoulders, and watches his sheep scattered like pale stones across the silvered meadow. Above him, the stars feel close, close enough to touch. He listens. The faint bleat of a ewe, the low sigh of wind over the grass, the steady gurgle of a stream somewhere past the ridge. For a long moment, he does nothing but breathe. When he closes the door again, the hut feels even warmer. He lays the empty cup by the hearth and curls on the straw bed, pulling the wool blanket high under his chin. The fire murmurs. The dog at the foot of the bed sighs in its sleep, tail twitching in some small dream. The warmth in his belly spreads like the last rays of a sun that never quite went away. His eyelids fall, and the room dissolves into darkness. He drifts into his second sleep with the quiet confidence of a man whose world is small, safe, and in rhythm with the night. Outside, the hills breathe, the flock dreams, the stream continues its patient song, and the shepherd's hut, an island of warmth in the endless dark, exhales into the silence of the medieval night. The apothecary's shop at the edge of the village does not sleep like the others. Its low roof blends with the shadows, and its single small window glows faintly with the orange of a dying lamp. The air outside is cool and still, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant smoke. But as you step inside, the world changes. Warmth greets you, soft and close, and the smell of herbs wraps around you like an invisible cloak. Lavender and dried chamomile hang from the rafters, their perfume thick in the air. Old wood and faint honey mingle with the sharper scents of mint and crushed leaves. Glass bottles line the shelves, each catching the light in some secret way. Some hold golden oils, others cloudy liquids, and some tiny dried flowers or dark powders that shift when the air moves. The shelves creak softly, and the entire shop feels alive in the quiet. The apothecary moves through his small kingdom without a sound. He's an old man, slow but certain, wrapped in a woolen robe that brushes the packed dirt floor. His hands are steady as he lifts a small clay pot from the edge of the coals. Steam rises from it in long, curling threads, carrying the grassy, sweet smell of milk and honey with a whisper of crushed poppy seed and chamomile. He pours it into a cup, the thick liquid glugging softly. The warmth fills the air, and he breathes it in before sipping slowly. The heat runs down his throat and spreads through his chest, sinking into his bones like a second blanket. The little shop has its own music at night. The coals in the hearth sigh and pop softly. A drop of condensed water falls from a beam with a faint tick. Somewhere in the corner, a mouse scurries through dried leaves, and the glass jars hum in the faintest way as if they hold echoes of the day inside them. The apothecary chews a small piece of honey cake left from supper. It is dense and chewy, clinging to his tongue with sugar and spice, and as he eats, the heaviness of second sleep begins to settle in his limbs. He walks to the front of the shop and peeks through the small window. The village is dark. A single dog lies curled near a door, its ears twitching in some small dream. Farther out, the fields are silver under the moon. He sees no one, hears nothing but the low breath of the night. Satisfied, he returns to his cot behind the counter, a narrow bed covered in a faded wool blanket. He lies down, the smell of herbs thick around him, the heat from the last cup of milk spreading through his belly. His breathing slows, the lamp flickers, then steadies, its light painting the rows of bottles in soft gold. As his eyes close, the sounds of the shop become a lullaby. The soft crackle of the coals, the whisper of the rafters, the almost silent tap of some herb brushing against another in the air. His hand rests lightly on the blanket, and the world slides away. The apothecary drifts into second sleep, and the little shop seems to sleep with him. Every bottle, every herb, every wooden beam hums in the same slow rhythm as his breath. Outside, the village remains wrapped in darkness. A faint mist curls along the ground, carrying the smell of damp grass. The night is patient and endless. The apothecary's shop, glowing faintly in the dark, is like a small warm heart in the chest of the sleeping world, and it beats slower and slower until the first pale light of dawn. The baker's kitchen at night is a warm, breathing world hidden beneath the quiet of the sleeping village. Outside, the narrow streets are cold and empty, cobblestones wet with dew, and the wind moves softly through the alleys, brushing against shuttered windows and the rough timber walls of old houses. But inside the bakery, the air is thick and alive with the scent of flour, yeast, and wood smoke, the kind of smell that settles into your chest and makes your shoulders loosen without you even knowing. The fire in the brick oven is low but steady, glowing like a soft heartbeat. Ash rests in grey drifts around the coals, and every now and then a log gives a small sigh, a pop that echoes gently through the room. Wooden tables are dusted with flour, the soft white powder catching the light of a single lantern. Bowls and spoons lie where they were left, like sleeping workers, and the faint, sweet smell of dough lingers in the warm corners. The baker is awake, moving slowly in his wool tunic, shoulders hunched from the day. His first sleep ended naturally, as it always does, when the night reached that still, secret hour. He stirs a bowl of sticky dough, his hands moving without thought, pressing and folding with the rhythm of someone who has done this all his life. The dough sighs under his palms, stretching, folding, and resting in a cycle as steady as breathing. He pauses to sip from a cup of warm ale sweetened with honey, the taste soft and malty, and takes a small bite of cheese and bread left from supper. The bread is coarse and cool, but when dipped in the warm ale it softens into a gentle, comforting mouthful. He chews slowly, staring at the fire, feeling its heat against his face and hands. From a shelf above the work table, spices and herbs hang in small bundles: fennel, rosemary, thyme. He crushes a little fennel between his fingers, letting the sweet, sharp scent rise into the warm air. It reminds him of spring markets and festival days, of laughter echoing down the same streets that now lie silent under the moon. The bakery hums quietly with life that isn't life. The tick of cooling metal, the soft shuffle of flour sifting through a sieve, the deep breath of the oven as it exhales warmth into the room. In this hour, the bakery belongs entirely to him and to the night. No footsteps, no voices, just the slow, heavy rhythm of a world resting. He shapes a small loaf, not for sale but for himself, pressing the edges gently, folding it into a rough round, and placing it on a board near the embers. The scent of rising bread fills the air, mixing with smoke and honey and the faint earthy tone of the wooden walls. He leans on the table and watches the fire through half-closed eyes, feeling the weight of second sleep pull at his body. The dog by the door shifts and sighs, curling tighter into its blanket. A mouse scurries across the floor near the wall, pausing to sniff before vanishing again. These tiny sounds, barely more than whispers, are enough to stitch the room into a lullaby. The baker sits back on his stool, the cup of ale warm in his hands, the smell of bread slowly wrapping around him like a wool cloak. As the loaf bakes, he feels his head nod. The world narrows to the glow of the coals, the scent of bread, the soft shuffle of his own breath. He dozes lightly, dreaming without leaving the room, and the bakery seems to dream with him. The walls sigh in the wind, the rafters settle, and even the flour in the air drifts slower, as if the night itself has grown heavy and warm. When the loaf is ready, he breaks it open, steam curling into the dark. He takes a bite, the crust crackling softly, the inside tender and sweet. The taste is simple, perfect, and as he swallows, the last tug of wakefulness loosens. He lies down on a small cot by the fire, the loaf half-eaten beside him, and lets the night take him fully into second sleep. The bakery breathes in time with him, and the quiet streets outside, silvered by the moon, remain undisturbed until the first light of dawn brushes the rooftops. The watermill by the stream rests in the folds of the medieval countryside, its great wooden wheel turning slowly under the soft pull of the current. The night air is cool and damp, carrying the smell of wet wood, river grass, and the faint sweetness of ground grain that drifts from the open window. Outside, the stream whispers against the stones, and every few moments a drop of water falls from the wheel into the dark current below with a soft plip that blends into the hush of the night. Frogs croak lazily along the muddy banks, and the reeds sway in the breeze as if breathing with the mill itself. Moonlight paints the wet boards in silver, and the world feels patient and unhurried. Inside, the mill is warmer, filled with the soft smell of flour, ash, and smoke from the banked fire. Sacks of barley and wheat lean against the walls, their tops tied with frayed twine, and a thin layer of flour dust floats in the lantern light like drifting stars. Wooden gears groan slowly with the weight of the turning wheel, the rhythm steady and hypnotic, a lullaby for anyone awake to hear it. Near the hearth, a small iron pot simmers quietly over embers. The miller moves with the ease of habit, lifting the pot and letting the steam curl up toward his face. It carries the earthy, sweet scent of grain mash touched with a drop of honey, the kind of simple comfort that warms the chest and settles the stomach. He pours a little into a wooden cup and takes a slow sip, feeling the heat spread through him as the night seeps into his bones. He tears a piece of coarse brown bread, dips it into the warm mash, and chews without hurry, the soft flavour of earth and grain grounding him in the stillness of the hour. The only sounds are the creak of wood, the drip of water, the quiet murmur of the stream outside, and the occasional rustle of a mouse in the corner, or a bird shifting in the rafters above. Each noise lands like a soft note in a song meant to soothe rather than wake. He leans back against the warm stone of the hearth, pulling his cloak tighter, letting his eyes drift half-closed as the mill sings its slow, steady song. The rhythm of the water and the wheel blends with his breathing. The faint orange glow of the coals paints the room in gentle light, making the edges of the sacks and the lines of the tools blur. The world outside barely exists now, just the stream, the night air, and the wheel turning without rush. He moves to his straw bed in the corner, the coarse wool blanket scratchy but welcoming, and lies down with a small sigh. The mill continues its slow, steady heartbeat around him. His breaths deepen. His mind softens. The last thing he feels is the warmth in his chest and the soft hum of the water before second sleep pulls him under. The mill dreams with him, the wheel turning slow and patient, keeping quiet watch until the first pale light of morning touches the stream. The roadside inn rests on the edge of the old trade path, a lonely timber building leaning slightly into the wind, its thatch roof damp with night mist. By day it is alive with clatter and chatter, the stamping of hooves and the smell of ale and roasted meat spilling into the road. But now, deep in the medieval night, it has exhaled all its noise and heat, leaving only the soft, drowsy hum of a world at rest. The air outside is cool and heavy with the smell of wet earth and faint smoke from the dying fire. A single lantern sways by the door, its light stretching across the puddled dirt and trembling in the slight breeze. From the stables comes the muffled sound of a horse shifting in its sleep, a soft snort followed by the creak of wood and the rustle of straw. Beyond that, the night is empty and endless. Inside, the inn is a small world of warmth and shadow. The main room is lit by the last glow of the hearth. The fire no longer roaring, just a nest of orange coals and an occasional flicker of flame. The smell of smoke and old wood mingles with the lingering sense of supper. Roasted onion, bread, and the faint sweetness of spiced wine. Wooden tables sit scattered across the room, scarred by knives and stained by years of mugs and plates. On two benches wrapped in wool cloaks, a pair of travellers have surrendered to second sleep. One snores quietly, the other stirs now and then, their boots still on, heads resting against the wall. Their slow breathing and the soft whisper of the fire are the only sounds, blending with the faint tick of cooling metal in the hearth. Behind the counter, the innkeeper moves with the slow patience of habit. His first sleep has ended, as it always does, and he tends to the coals with a poker, drawing a small wave of heat into the room. He takes a clay mug of ale, thinned with warm water and touched with a drop of honey, and sips slowly, feeling it settle in his chest. From the kitchen he retrieves a small wedge of yesterday's bread and a bit of hard cheese, nibbling as he leans against the wall. The quiet hours belong to him, to the fire, and to the slow pulse of the inn. He can hear the dog sigh near the door, curled in its corner, and the distant drip of water from the eaves outside. The world beyond these walls has disappeared into the night. The road is empty. The trees on the edge of the clearing are just black shapes against the sky. Even the wind moves softly, brushing past the shutters like a careful hand. Inside, the inn breathes slowly, every creak and sigh part of its own lullaby. The innkeeper's eyelids grow heavy, and he slides onto a low stool near the hearth, his mug warm in his hands. He watches the last coal pulse and fade and pulse again. The fire's glow reflects in his eyes, and the warmth in his belly and the soft rhythm of the night draw him toward the edge of sleep. As he drifts, the whole room seems to lean into the quiet with him. The wooden beams, the straw in the rafters, the dog by the door, the travellers wrapped in cloaks, all of them moving in the same slow rhythm of the medieval night. The inn feels like a cradle now, rocking in time with the wind and the faint creak of the sign outside. The fire sinks lower, the air cools slightly, and the deep weight of the night presses gently against the walls. By the time the innkeeper's head tips forward and his breathing evens, the inn has fully joined the world of second sleep. Outside, the road is silent, the lantern sways slower, and the faintest fog creeps along the ground. The inn glows like a single warm heart in the dark, and it will stay that way until the first grey light of dawn slides across the threshold. The monastery library is a world that only truly comes alive in the deepest hours of the night. By day, it is a place of quiet study and the soft shuffle of sandals on stone. But at night, with the rest of the monastery wrapped in sleep, it transforms into a sanctuary of shadows and whispered memories. Thick stone walls hold the cool breath of the night, and narrow windows let in only slivers of moonlight that fall like pale ribbons across the floor. The air smells of aged wood, dry parchment, and a faint hint of beeswax from the few lamps still burning. The library is long and narrow, its shelves carved from dark timber, heavy with the weight of handwritten manuscripts and leather-bound volumes. The spines, cracked with age, catch the lamplight in soft, uneven glimmers. A single candle flickers on a reading table, its flame bowing to a draught that sneaks in through the old stonework. The light reaches just far enough to make the gold and red inks of an illuminated page shimmer like hidden treasure. Every corner of the room holds a soft hush, the kind of silence that makes you feel the slow turning of the world. Brother Matthias, an old monk with stooped shoulders and careful hands, moves softly through the rows of books. His first sleep has ended, as it often does, and in these hours between sleeps, he finds comfort here, among the voices of the past. His wool habit swishes faintly with each step, and the faint scuff of his sandals is the only other sound. He carries a small clay cup of warm milk mixed with honey, and the steam curls gently into the air, catching the light as he walks. He pauses to take a sip, letting the warmth spread through his chest, his breath slowing with the heat. He chooses a book from the lower shelf, its leather cover rough beneath his fingers. Dust rises as he opens it, drifting like tiny ghosts through the candlelight. He sits at the table and traces the letters with his finger, reading softly to himself in a voice that blends with the library's natural hum. The fire in the small brazier by the wall gives a muted crackle, and once in a while a log shifts with a soft groan echoing against the stone. Somewhere high in the rafters, a bird stirs in its sleep, feathers rustling faintly before settling again. The rhythm of the night wraps around him. He reads a passage, sips his milk, and listens to the breathing of the library. The smell of parchment, the faint taste of honey, the warmth of the cup in his hand, each piece folds together into a gentle weight that pulls at his eyelids. He knows this ritual well. This is the hour when the mind wanders but does not work, when thoughts come and go like leaves floating on a slow-moving stream. He thinks of prayers, of spring planting, of the steady passing of seasons, and then of nothing at all. His head tips forward. The book remains open under his hand, and the candle flickers as if nodding with him. The sound of the fire softens, the weight of the blanket on his shoulders feels heavier, and the world narrows to a warm circle of light surrounded by infinite quiet. Outside, the wind brushes against the stone walls, carrying the scent of the nearby fields and the faint rustle of trees. Inside, time slows to a crawl, and the library holds him like a cradle. Brother Matthias finally leans back on the bench, the empty cup warm near his hand, and lets second sleep take him. The library joins him in his rest, its shadows and shelves exhaling together as though the entire room has settled into its own dream. The night continues, patient and unbroken, until the first light of dawn creeps through the windows and the soft songs of morning birds call the monastery back to life. The castle's great hall is hushed in the late hours, resting in the slow, deep rhythm of the medieval night. By day it is alive with clatter and voices, with fire roaring in the vast hearth and footsteps echoing across the stone floor. But now, with the moon high and the torches long extinguished, the hall has become a vast cradle of shadow and quiet. Only the faintest light filters in from the high, narrow windows, touching the cold stone walls and catching the edge of the tapestries in soft silver. The air is cool and smells of ash, old wood, and the lingering trace of roasted meats and spiced wine from the evening's feast. A single fire still glows in the grand hearth. Its embers are soft and low, barely more than a heart's pulse of orange and red. Occasionally a coal collapses in on itself with a gentle sigh, sending a swirl of sparks into the still air. The hall listens to its own silence. broken only by the muted creak of the wooden rafters above and the faint rustle of the heavy curtains that stir when the wind sneaks through the arrow-slit windows. In one corner on a long wooden bench, a young servant curls beneath a woolen blanket, breathing slow and deep. His first sleep ended when he stirred to tend the fire, but the weight of second sleep has already begun to pull him down again. A small tray with the remnants of his midnight snack rests on the floor nearby. A piece of coarse brown bread, a few crumbs of cheese, and a wooden cup half filled with lukewarm ale. He had dipped the bread into the ale, letting it soften just enough to chew slowly, savouring the simple warmth and sweetness before drowsiness crept in. The great hall itself feels alive, though no one moves. The tapestries along the walls seem to sway in the shifting air, their faded colours hiding stories of nights and hunts and feasts long past. The scent of tallow from the extinguished candle still lingers, mixing with the faint tang of iron from the suits of armour that stand along the walls like silent watchers. Somewhere in the darkness above, a pigeon stirs in the rafters, cooing softly before settling again. Beyond the hall, the castle sleeps as a single breathing organism. In the kitchens, the ashes of the day's fires smoulder quietly. In the stables, horses shift in their stalls, hooves muffled by straw, warm breath clouding the night air. Guards along the walls walk their slow circuits, the faint clink of chain and the soft tap of boots on stone echoing distantly through the corridors. All of it comes together in a lullaby made of stone, wood, and wind, a lullaby that carries through the empty hall and into the dreams of anyone who lingers here. The young servant stirs once, turning on his side, the blanket slipping from his shoulder. His breathing deepens, the warmth of the fire, the faint taste of bread and ale still in his mouth, and the soft murmur of the castle around him become threads in the tapestry of his sleep. The hall feels timeless, as if it has seen this moment for centuries, a body sinking into second sleep while the world beyond the walls moves softly, without hurry. Hours will pass like this, unnoticed, until the first grey hint of dawn touches the narrow windows. Then the castle will wake, fires will roar again, boots will echo, and voices will rise. But for now, in this long, unbroken moment, the hall and its sleeping servant belong to the quiet, to the soft pull of the medieval night, to the warm weight of dreams. And as the last ember in the hearth gives a gentle sigh, the castle exhales with it, carrying its sleepers deeper into the tender silence of second sleep. And now, as our long journey through the medieval night comes to an end, let these quiet images linger with you. The soft crackle of fire, the whisper of wind through stone halls, the taste of warm milk and bread, the rhythm of first sleep and second sleep, all of it guiding your mind into stillness. May these memories carry you deeper into your own peaceful dreams. If you drifted off during this journey, that's exactly where you were meant to be. Sleep well and sweet dreams.